So, as I say, you're very welcome. My name's Graham Fisher, the Designated Safeguarding Officer for Berks and Bucks. Also on the call, we've got Rob Roslin, my colleague. Rob works in the compliance field. So Rob's here and can answer questions around compliance for DBS and the safeguarding course and any explanations you might need. And hopefully Rob will also be keeping an eye on the chat just to see if there's any questions come in that don't come up during the session that I don't see. So please feel free to unmute and talk if you have a question, but also please use the chat for the question and we'll come to those. Basically, I'm going to do a lot of talking for the next 45 minutes or so, but there'll be a chance for questions when we finish. And as I say, anywhere through the evening, please feel free to put the questions in. So, you're very welcome. There we are. I told you, you're very welcome. Sorry, just admitting some more people. Some of you are new to the role, Club Welfare Officer, and the point of this meeting is just to try and make it clear what your role is, because you will get used and abused by clubs sometimes, and it's really important to know what your responsibility is in that role, and also to explain why you're not on your own and we are here to help you. And hopefully that may be confirmed by some of the more experienced welfare officers here, that sometimes you're in a very difficult position, but we will always do everything we can to assist with that. So what are we going to look at tonight? We're going to look at several things. We'll look generally at the role of the welfare officer. We'll look at the relationship you may have with players at your club, your role within the club. We'll look at everybody's favourite subject, the DBS system. We will look at your relationship with me and Rob and the rest of us at County FA. We'll look at the type of things that you're likely to be confronted with in your role, and just some slight, a little bit of suggestion about how you might deal with certain things, and then we'll have time for some questions at the end. Hopefully we'll be done by around 8 o'clock, but I'll be here for as long as you need anything from me. So the role of the club welfare officer, putting it in very basic terms, you are responsible for making sure that your club or league, if you're a league welfare officer, operate a safe and fun environment for the children playing in your club or league. So you've just got to make sure everything is safe for the children. That's in a nutshell what it's about. You also have to make sure that all the coaches, and we'll come on to the wide definition of coaches and helpers, but make sure that all of the people working with the children at your club have the appropriate qualifications and checks and training done. That will be your responsibility. You will be the person that people come to about that. And of course, it goes without saying that at the club, you will be the point of contact for anyone who's got any concern around the safeguarding of a child or around an adult at risk who may be facing issues. I want to make it very clear early on, and we'll look at this in a bit more detail later. Actual safeguarding issues are very, very rare to come to a welfare officer. If you get a situation where a child actually is at risk of serious harm, then you either ring the police if it's immediate, or you let me know. If it's not urgent, you let me know and I'll take it on and deal with it from the County FA. So although there can be some quite scary things, you have to remember that a lot of things that come into you and me are not really safeguarding, but we'll look at that uh, in a bit more detail in a minute. So your role with the players, you are obviously in a role that is a position of trust, and you've got to get the confidence of the children. They have to get trust you and be confident that you're someone they can speak to and someone who they can rely on. So you, if you can, the best you can, you want to make yourself visible and be known to parents and children at the club. So however that's done in your club, on a website, in the initial uh, information that goes out to parents, particularly new parents, about who's who in the club. Um, Try and get your photo on the website so people know who you are. But making yourself visible is really important. There's a bit of a role here that is it's a little bit wishy-washy, but what we're trying to develop, and clubs and leagues and the county FAs, we're all trying to do this. We have to listen to the children. Football, particularly grassroots football, over many, many years, has decided what children want and then given it to them. And very rarely have we actually asked the children what they want. And we need to move towards trying to do that a bit more. So, if you are in contact with the children, which hopefully you will be, you will hear things, you may ask for information, so you will have that information as to what the children want, and you can then represent that voice at committee meetings and elsewhere to let the other committee members know what the children actually want. So, that's something to develop. Obviously, you need to set an example, you'll be a role model, and you need to check and challenge people who are not. Um, that will particularly be, it might not be, you might be very lucky at your club, but it may very well be parents and other siblings, people watching the games who will get overexcited and behave poorly. So whenever you're around, whenever you can, challenging that poor behavior, not in a way where you're putting yourself in any physical danger. Let's make that absolutely clear. But if you can check and challenge people who maybe are saying things with emotion, they're not really thinking about what they're saying. So being that person who can challenge where appropriate. So your role within the club, let me just put these on. Your role within the club, the first thing to say is you should be on the club management committee. No matter what anybody else tells you at your club, you are the most important person in that club. Okay. You are sometimes, as a welfare officer, slightly disregarded. It can be, well, we've got to have a club welfare officer, so we've ticked a box, we've got one. People do not understand just how important the role of welfare officer is. If the children are in any danger, if children are not happy and safe, if we have coaches and volunteers working with children who haven't been checked, then children are in serious danger and the football club is in a mess and at huge risk. So your role in making sure that the children are safe and that the people looking after the children are not dangerous to the children is the most important thing of that football club. So, getting yourself in on that management committee and really making sure that the other people know how important your role is quite important. So you'll be hopefully looking at safeguarding strategy, structure, making sure that everything is in place. If you have a club website, making sure that the appropriate policies are on the website and they're up to date, that type of thing. The checking and challenge I've already talked about, and that applies to coaches and it applies to other committee members as well. because people will say and do things that are really not acceptable. And if you see it or hear it, you might want to speak up. The last one there, any complaints that come into the club via parents, children, coaches, me at the county FA, our discipline staff at the county FA will tend to come to you. So you do tend to be the complaints person. So compliance, the area, as I say, my colleague Rob, who's on the call, will be in touch with you all about, I've no doubt, over the coming weeks. There are two things basically that I'm going to talk about here. Every person coaching an under 18 or below team must have two things. They must have an enhanced DBS check that has been approved by the FA, and I'll talk about what that means in a moment. That check must have been done within the previous 3 years. They also need the FA Safeguarding Children course to be completed, and that needs to have been completed within the last 2 years, just to be awkward. But so they therefore need recent DBS check and a Safeguarding Children course qualification. They will be your responsibility to make sure that they've all got that. Where we have this slight issue is, and I mentioned this when we went through the agenda, is what coaching means. Basically, the wording is that every manager or coach must have a DBS check. What that actually means is any person who is regularly responsible for supervising the children at your football club. That's who it means. Now, we sometimes have clubs saying, oh yeah, they're a parent helper, they're not a coach. And parent helpers don't need a DBS check. They might say, oh yeah, they're the team secretary, they're not a coach or a manager, they don't need a DBS check. Well, those roles don't need a DBS check in practice on the system. But if those people are regularly working with those children, they need to be checked. And we don't really understand why clubs are looking for a way around doing those checks, because what they're trying to do there is not check that the person in charge of the children at the club is safe to undertake that role. So, you know, it's really important that anyone, whatever they do, whatever they're called on the whole game system or in club portal, if they spend time looking after children, supervising the children, they must have a check done. So don't get too caught up in the, well, hang on, we've got a manager and we've got a coach, this other person is only a parent helper. If that parent helper is at every training session and taking some of the session, then they need a DBS check. I hope that's made that a bit clearer. The FA approved bit that I'll talk about later, just briefly, is that when somebody completes a DBS check, everybody gets a certificate at the end of that process. So if I'm a mass murderer and I ask for a DBS check, I will be sent a certificate. Now, on that certificate, it will say, this person is a mass murderer and really shouldn't go anywhere near children, or words to that effect. But nobody knows that that's on my check apart from the government, the DBS, and me. No one else knows. So I could come to you as the welfare officer and say, yeah, I've got a DBS certificate. Look, I've done my DBS. Here's my certificate. That does not mean I have been cleared. That means the checks have been done. What happens then is that the FA or the company called First Advantage, who do this on behalf of the FA and for the DBS, will contact me and say, can you send that certificate in to me, please? And I then send it back, and the FA will then look at what's on that certificate and make a decision around whether I'm safe to coach children or not. So Just because someone's got a certificate doesn't mean that I've been cleared. It's when the FA clear that certificate. And at that point, the check on Club Portal, whole game at the moment, but Club Portal mainly now, will show as being accepted, and I will show as being compliant on the DBS. Until I show as being compliant, I have not been cleared to work with children in football. But we'll look a bit closer at DBS in a minute. So yes, you're responsible for all that. And the way we are moving now, and Rob and I are working very closely together on this, is that teams that are not being run by people with the correct DBS and safeguarding qualification, teams will have their affiliation suspended until either those people have got the right qualifications or someone else is brought in who has the right qualifications to run that team until those people have got the qualifications. We've been very, very helpful and lenient in the past, and I think we now need to start being a bit more forceful, because there's no justification for unchecked people to be looking after 8-year-old children on behalf of you as a club or us as a county FA. So compliance is an issue. You know, feel free to ask questions when we finish around compliance. Now, a quick look at the DBS process. I'll come to, I know they're very small, those pictures. I'll come to them in a moment. The first thing that happens is that you probably, or whoever does the DBS checks in your club, it probably will be you, will assign that person to the role of DBS applicant. And that's done in Club Portal, and the next slide we come to will show you how to do that. So you add the person as a DBS applicant. The person, I'm saying coach here, but it could be a manager, it could be a physio, or whoever you're doing a DBS check for. They then have to go into the whole game system at the moment. They go into the whole game service, WGS, and they click on a thing called the My DBS tab. Now, what you probably can't see in the left-hand picture, this is the front page of my whole game. So this is my front page, and you may be able to see down the left hand side here there are some tabs, and one of those tabs says My DBS. That person needs to click on their My DS tab, and that takes them to a new page. If I was completing a DBS check and you had added me as an applicant, down here it would say Barks and Bucks FA, and next to it there's a green button that says select. All I have to do as the coach is click on that select. Once I've done that, an email comes to me, there's a link on it, I click on the link and it takes me to a website called Online Disclosures, where you make the application for your DBS check and you list your ID documents, the documents you're using to prove who you are. So you add them as a DBS applicant, they go into whole game, click on select next to the club, and they then get an email, they click on the link and they complete their application. Once they've done their application, you or whoever is the verifier for the club, again, probably you, check the documents, and you'll get shown how to do that in due course if you're not already doing it. You put the application through, it gets paid for. It's £10 for volunteers that goes off to DBS, and the once it's paid for, the check goes off to DBS. It then goes off to the police for various checks, and when it's completed, they send it back to the DBS. If all the way through the process where it's with the police, you can see on Club Portal where it is in the process. And when it's completed, and that's when the check is completed, the certificate is printed and sent to the person who's had the DBS done on them. The applicant gets the certificate. If there are no entries on that certificate, so there's no police record, no intelligence, and this accounts for about, I think it's around 93% of applications, there's nothing on them. First Advantage, the company who do the DBS checks for us, contact the FA at Wembley and say, this person's check is clear, there are no issues. The FA then will update Club Portal and the whole game system to say the certificate is accepted, the check has been accepted, and they will show as compliant in the Club Portal. There will be a gap between the certificate being issued and them showing as being compliant, because it's the length of time it takes for First Advantage to tell the FA and the FA then to update the systems. So there can be anything up to a few days between the two. So when someone receives their certificate, don't forget, that doesn't mean it's clear. It's only cleared by the FA when it says so in Club Portal on the whole game. Because if there are entries on that certificate, that's when First Advantage will contact the applicant and say, before we go any further, please send your certificate to us so we can check it. So the person will then send the certificate to First Advantage, they'll have a look, and if it's something like the person has a shoplifting, they stole a bar of chocolate 20 years ago when they were a teenager, then they will just send it back and say, yeah, that's fine, tell the FA, and it will be updated to compliant. But if there's entries on the certificate that First Advantage think, actually, I'm not sure the FA would approve this, they will then send the certificate to the FA, to the safeguarding officers at Wembley, and they will then decide whether that person is approved or not to work with children in football. And they will deal directly with that person. All you or we will ever know is that that person is not yet compliant. So we won't get told what's going on. We won't get told anything at all, because it's private, confidential. It's none of our business. You and we know either they're clear to work with children or they're not. That's the only information we get. The individual will know exactly what's going on. I did just see, I don't know whether Rob's going to answer that, but I did see someone there just pop up saying that something's been at stage 4 for probably months. And Rob's answering that now, I guess. But yeah, stage 4 is the police check. So once it leaves you and it goes off to the police, it's in their hands, and there's not much we can do to hurry it up. And if they're behind, which the police nationally are at the moment, it can take a while for that check to be completed. Okay, so here we go, more very small pictures, but I'll just talk you through them. This is Club Portal. So this is the home page. On the top left is the home page of a demonstration club. And down the left-hand side, so this would be your home page of your club. You'd have your club name at the top there. Down the left-hand side, one of these tabs is officials. If you click on officials, you get a list of everyone who's associated with your club as an official, i.e. not a player, but anyone else who's associated with your club. If you're doing a DBS check for one of those officials, you click on them. So I've chosen this person. You just click on their name, and on the bottom left, I've chosen this person. I click on the person, and over on the right hand side, which you won't be able to see in this small writing, but right over on the right top corner, it says assign roles. If you click on assign roles, you go to the bottom right and a list of roles come up. The bottom one is called safeguarding. You click on safeguarding, and the first thing that comes up underneath is DBS applicant. and you click on DBS applicant and confirm, and DBS applicant and confirm, and that person is then added. At that point, you just need to tell the person, yeah, you've been added as an applicant. You need to go into whole game and click on select next to the club name in whole game. So your involvement is that simple. Click on the person's name, click on assign role, click on DBS applicant, and tell them you've done it. Your next role is when they've done everything they need to do, and you can check their documents, verify their documents, and that will be taught to you in due course. So that's how you start. I know this is a whistle stop, but this will be online and I will send the link out to everybody. So your relationship with us hopefully will be a good one. Hopefully most people on here who have been doing this for a while will confirm that we will have regular dialogue. Now that can be you emailing, phoning me, or me sending out information to you. If there are any safeguarding breaches, and we'll look at what that is in a minute, you will report them to me immediately. They have to come to me, or in my absence, Rob on this call is a deputy safeguarding officer, so you can contact either of us. If I'm not around, Rob is a person to speak to. We have meetings once a month. So every month we have a CPD session, a network meeting, where we'll look at either usually topical issues, or just a general look at something that a welfare officer looks at. So they're good CPD sessions. They're good to be able to speak to other welfare officers. So, if you can get to those, I send the invites out with plenty of notice. If you can get to them, they're really good. They're really important. Some of them are me waffling and you won't get anything out of it, perhaps. Some of them you will pick up stuff that is really important. So if you can get to the meetings, please do. We can share experiences and explain about different issues that have happened and poor practice that goes on throughout youth football. So there will be a youth voice thing. So we will talk to each other about how we can listen to the young players in our counties, and we will very often be talking about compliance, complaints, disciplinary investigations, and that type of thing. You may be very lucky at a club where that won't happen at all, or you may be at a club where there's quite a lot that goes on. But I suspect most of you will speak to me or someone else at the county FA about these sorts of issues at some point during the coming season. What you will get from us is plenty of support. I really genuinely mean that any issue you've got, you can always drop me a line, drop me an email, and I will look at it and I will come back to you. I might come back and say, yeah, I don't think this is something for me or you or whatever, but I will always help. You're not on your own. There are a lot of resources online. Our website, for example, and the FA website, if you put in FA safeguarding into Google or Barks and Bucks FA safeguarding, all of the documents, the guidance documents, everything are on there for you. We're hoping by certainly early in the season, we're going to have a sort of frequently asked questions thing on the website that should be able to help as well. If nothing there helps, then you come to us. Absolutely, we're happy to. And I try to make sure that we are very prompt in our reply. It'll certainly be same day or next day whenever possible. Obviously, if it's an urgent thing around safeguarding, it will be same day, it'll be straight away. We also have these CPD meetings every month rather, and every week I will send out, we call it a bulletin on a Friday, but it's any updates that I think are important that you know, or any information you should have. So that will come out to you all. So there's plenty of stuff coming from us. Moving on to what you'll be dealing with. I know, I say again, I know this is whistle stop, but don't forget it's being recorded. Moving on to what you are likely to deal with. There are three types of incident. The first one is where somebody has behaved poorly. We'll look at what each of these things are in a moment. Where someone has behaved poorly and they've just been a bit silly. We tend to refer to these as someone needs to be told, don't be a wally, basically, is what we're talking about. So they've behaved poorly at children's football. It will be probably left with you to deal with that, to um, talk to the people involved and give appropriate advice. But that will always be, we're always available to give help and advice and support around those issues if required. The second level is what is now called a low level concern. And I'll, as I say, we'll go on to explain what each of these things are. But a low level concern is a bit more than poor practice, and you together with me will deal with that as an issue. And then, of course, we've got actual safeguarding issues. As I say, they are few and far between. When they come up, we need straight away to report it, and I will liaise with all the different agencies, police, social services, education, etc. And the matter will be referred to the FA safeguarding team at Wembley, who will then oversee that complaint and keep you up to date with what's going on. So those are the three areas. So basically, it's not very good, really quite bad, and awful. They're the three things. So safeguarding, as I say, this doesn't come up very often, but we'll have a look. The definition is a harm or a risk of harm to children. And to be a safeguarding issue, the risk of that harm needs to be serious. So a risk of serious harm to a child. Now, if you think in football, that is not going to happen very often in grassroots football. If there is any discrimination involved, so the harm to the child or the risk of harm to the child is fed by a hatred, homophobia, racism, any other discriminatory act, any of the protected characteristics in the Equalities Act, then that aggravates all of the offences and will make them certainly the sanctions higher. So the various types of safeguarding, let's just put them all down there. So that, there we are. So the first type, you'll have all done or be doing safeguarding training. You're all probably people who are inclined to be aware of those types of issues anyway. But just a brief run through: neglect. So as you will probably know, that's a failure to meet basic needs. So warmth, clothing, food, those type of things. Physical abuse, as we all know, anything physical, hitting, kicking, etc. Emotional abuse, humiliation of somebody, being insulting to somebody. Sexual abuse, where you are a child is forced into or tricked into sexual activity, any physical sexual act, or sending inappropriate messages, pictures via social media, WhatsApp, etc. Grooming, where an adult develops a relationship with a child with a view to sexually abusing them. And then there's exploitation, where children might be trafficked for crime or sexual abuse, or children can be radicalized in various ways as well. So there's a whole range. Now, when we look down there, you may well see children who don't wear a coat. Their parents don't give them a coat when they go to training and it's pouring the rain. You might see children who don't turn up with a drink when they've been told to, children who don't bring any food when they've been asked to. All of these things potentially could be neglect. Obviously, on their own, they're not, and they're not a serious safeguarding issue. It would be when a picture is built up of various things that it becomes an issue. Hitting, kicking, etc. This will happen in matches. In matches, children against children, they are disciplinary offences that will be dealt with by the referee or by the FA around discipline. They're not safeguarding issues. Any adult in football who kicks or hits or bites a child in football, clearly that would be a safeguarding issue. Doesn't happen very often. Coaches and parents shouting insults and humiliation or humiliating players and young referees happens on a weekly basis, not to a level where we would say this is a safeguarding issue, where the child is at risk of serious harm. They will be very probably low-level concerns, but probably not safeguarding. But again, we'll look at that. Anything around sexual abuse from an adult to a child, or in some cases a child to a child, will get reported. It comes through me to start with, but I will immediately refer that off to other agencies. And things with grooming and exploitation, things to report, absolutely things to report if you feel those things are happening. Come to me. Obviously, as I've said before, if it's urgent, it's 999. If it's not urgent, come to me. So safeguarding, pretty straightforward, won't happen very often. Has that child been seriously harmed, or are they at risk of serious harm for any of these reasons? If so, that's a safeguarding issue, needs to be reported immediately. Bullying basically is all of the above, where an adult is using that balance of power to intimidate children. Can be around refereeing now with a lot of young referees, but again, that's likely to be low-level concern rather than safeguarding. So I've said low-level concern quite a lot, and a low-level concern is where an adult has behaved in a way that is really poor. It's not safeguarding, and it's not they don't just need to be told don't do it again. It's potentially a worry. And the reason I say this is that nearly all abusers start with low-level offences. It's very rare that somebody who abuses a child, the first time they do it is a serious safeguarding incident. There will be occasions prior to that. So if you see or hear of something that you think is a bit more than just, oh, that coach has been a bit stupid, I'll tell them not to do it again, or I get informed of those sorts of incidents, we'll deal with it as a low-level concern. That means I will make a record of that person. They will go into the system, so should their name come up again, they'll be treated more seriously. But also, depending on how much of a concern it is, you and your committee and/or I may talk to this person and explain to them exactly why they are being regarded as a concern, and leave them in no uncertain terms about what they've done. So what type of things can we do? It might be we need to get the coach to sign the codes of conduct again to show, yes, I promise I will abide by these codes of conduct around safeguarding and respect and behaviour. They may be given a verbal warning. They may be given a written warning. They might meet with your committee and/or me. All of these things are decided by your club committee. And in the end, they can be dismissed from the club. The really important thing to remember is that coaches represent the club. It's not the other way around. The club don't owe anything to the coach other than thanks for doing it. The coach is representing the club. So if they are representing your club in a way that your club doesn't want them to, then your club committee needs to be dealing with it. So you might feel that what they've done is so serious, the committee might say, no, we're gonna not have this person at our club anymore. We're going to terminate contact with them, and you might dismiss them. If there are a series of poor practice or low level concerns, you might be going down the verbal warning, then a written warning before a meeting, and then finally dismissal. So although they're volunteers, they're not covered by employment legislation. The appropriate way to deal with people is by following those um, structures that are in place in employment. So what isn't safeguarding, and what will you be told about? What will be your main work as a welfare officer, and my main work as the designated safeguarding officer, but isn't safeguarding? Children not getting equal playing time is not a safeguarding issue. It might go against your club ethos. It might, well, it is against FA guidance, but if it's only guidance, your club decides whether children get equal playing time or not. And that's a matter that the club can deal with. It's not a safeguarding issue. A coach telling off a child isn't a safeguarding issue. The child might deserve to be told off. Children sometimes have to be told off. And it's not a safeguarding issue. It might be poor practice, might even be a low level concern, but it's certainly not safeguarding. Anything that happens during a game in the field of play, not what coaches do, what players do on the pitch, is not safeguarding. The other team, the other under-9 team, were quite clearly sent out to cause serious injury to my 8-year-old children, and they were flying into waist-high tackles. The referee did nothing. You will get these reports. I get these reports on a weekly basis. It's not safeguarding. It's dealt with on the day by the referee. If the referee hasn't dealt with it, clubs can put in reports about referees. When enough reports go in, referees will be challenged. We cannot look at fouls committed in a game retrospectively. It's impossible. So it might be nasty, it might be unpleasant, but if a coach feels that their children are seriously at risk of being harmed, seriously at risk of being seriously harmed, they should remove those children from the pitch. They'll be fined for not completing the game, but they'll be able to sleep at night, and it will only be a £10 fine that the club will probably pay. And it's not much of an issue. There has to be a rule, and anyone can email me and ask me why that rule's in place, and I can quite happily explain it. But if I'm in charge of children and I believe that there is a safeguarding risk, not that the other team are a bit physical, but I believe there is a safeguarding risk, I will take those children off the pitch. Sue me if I do it. My job is to protect those children. We're not going to look back at fouls. Clubs who decide that they are going to stream players, so they're going to pick players on the basis of ability rather than equal playing time and giving everyone a chance. It goes against FA guidance in the foundation stage, the 7 to 12-year-old phase. It goes against guidance, but it's not a safeguarding issue. It's up to the club, and as long as the club are telling parents that's what they're doing, there is no issue. Absolutely no issue. We might say it would be better if you had an inclusive policy. We would say that, but it's not a safeguarding issue. It's just how the club decide to do things. Swearing generally is not a safeguarding issue. It's obviously poor practice at children's football, and it could be a low-level concern, but it's not safeguarding. With any of these things, any complaints, the only time we would get involved for these type of issues are if there has been a breach of safeguarding regulations. So if something has happened where safeguarding hasn't been followed, if the coach involved, for example, hasn't got a DBS check or doesn't have a in-date safeguarding children qualification, then we will get involved because that person shouldn't have been there. So yes, all he did was shout at a child during a game. We're not interested in that particularly if it was a minor incident. But if that person is someone who hasn't got a DBS check, then we suddenly become very interested, and then you'll definitely hear from us about that. If there is discrimination involved, So what was shouted was discriminatory in any way, then we will be involved. And if someone has made a complaint to the club and they feel that you haven't dealt with that complaint properly, they can come to us, and all we will do is check that you have followed an appropriate investigation. So hopefully your club will have a complaints policy, and we will check that you have actually followed the club complaints policy. We won't reinvestigate the case. That's your responsibility, but they can say if they don't think it's been investigated properly, and we will just speak to you and double check that you've followed the right policy for that. That's the only way we'll get involved in these things. How do you deal with these things, which are poor practice or bad practice? Exactly the same. So get the code of conduct signed again, verbal warning, written warning, a meeting with your committee if they're not meeting what you want them to do. And if you feel necessary, ask them to leave. You don't want them representing the club, absolutely fine. So that's a whistle stop tour of what you're doing. I just want to put a reminder here of why we do it and the fantastic job that you all do and will do. And the reason is, I don't know if anyone knows who this chap is, but his name is Barry Bennell. Now, he's the person that when the historical sexual abuse cases came to the fore 4 or 5 years ago now, when Andy Woodward very bravely went on to the Victoria Derbyshire programme on television as an adult and told how he was abused as a child in football. And Barry Bennell was the person involved in that case and several others. Paul Stewart, ex-England striker, and David White, ex-Manchester City striker, they came out and told the same stories. And Barry Bennell is thankfully serving a long prison sentence. These things happened 30 odd years ago, but they're happening now. Let's not try and pretend that there is no abuse in grassroots football in this country at the moment. Hopefully there's not much. Hopefully we've eliminated most of it. But the important thing to remember is he's in prison. He was the person that was mentioned, but so was he. This chap isn't in prison because he took his own life just before the court case started. But this person is, and this person is, and this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. There's 300 suspects for historical sexual abuse in football, a vast majority of which are in grassroots football. There are over 1,000 adults who have reported that they were abused as children in grassroots football. So for us to think that these people on this slide aren't being replaced by other similar people in grassroots football, we'd be kidding ourselves. They're out there. This is why we do our DBS checks. This is why we do safeguarding awareness. And if any coach, as they will do, plays awkward with you around doing their qualifications or getting a DBS and thinks it's a pain, and they will give you all sorts of grief when you try and chase them to do things, just remind them why we're doing them. Because if you are using a coach or manager or whatever with a youth team at your club who doesn't have a DBS check, then you are potentially allowing one of these people or their replacements to work with children at your club. And you just can't do that. We can't do it. We can't have that on our conscience. So whilst most of what you deal with, 99.9 recurring percent and possibly 100% of what you deal with will be unhappy parents because their son or daughter was taken off at half time on Saturday and they didn't think it was fair, and their child's mental health has been seriously damaged because of it, and they want the coach at least suspended, if not hung, drawn, and quartered. That's what you'll deal with most of the time. But the reason you're doing the job and I'm doing the job is to stop the people on this slide and their followers, their successors, from harming the children at our football clubs. That's why we do it. It's a crucial role, and you're all fantastic for doing it, and I really appreciate it. So that's it. That's where we are. So I have seen some questions going into the chat, and I've seen Rob answering them, so that's great. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and we can just do any questions anyone's got. There we are. So if you have a question that hasn't been answered in the chat, then please feel free to unmute or put your hand up and ask away, and Rob or I will try and answer you. I know there's been a lot to take in tonight, by the way, and I do apologise for that, but it is such a crucial role. Please feel free. I can see a hand up. Can I see whose hand? Mike. Yeah. Hi, Mike.
Hi, Graham. Just two quick things.
Yeah.
When I did my original training 5 or 6 years ago, it was made very clear to us, and this might be interesting for the newer people, that pitch condition was not a welfare issue. It comes up about once a year, January, February, mud, ice, frozen, not being a welfare. We always sort of address it as a committee, but I just wanted to make sure that guidance hadn't changed.
No, absolutely right. Much as the poor behaviour, Mike, really, it's the referee's decision whether a pitch is playable. It's important to point out that very often these days that referee might be 14 years old, or 15 or 16. So the adult coaches involved with the teams don't, suggest to them they don't shrug their shoulders and say, well, it's not my job, it's the referee's job. They might need to step forward and actually take some responsibility and have a chat with the referee and the other coach, and between them agree. But yeah, a decision about whether the pitch is playable or not, absolutely not a safeguarding issue. That's a football and health and safety issue.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
And
my second question, very technical thing. Once the FA approves a DBS clearance and it shows up in the portal, is it okay for us to go in and delete that coach as a DBS applicant, or will that happen automatically at some point?
It would be fantastic if you went in and did that, because unfortunately it doesn't happen automatically, which is very annoying. It should do, but it doesn't. So yes, as soon as it's showing as compliant or accepted, you can remove them as a DBS applicant. Absolutely, you can. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone else?
We have a question, Graham, in the chat.
Yeah.
If you have a coach who does not satisfy DBS criteria, is there advice on how to manage the transition and also then manage them as a parent supporter instead of a coach type person?
Yeah, that's if the person has applied. So I'm assuming we're talking here that the person comes back and the FA say, no, this person is not approved to be a coach. Well, there shouldn't, how can I put this? There shouldn't be a transition, because that person shouldn't have been coaching until they had the clear DBS. So there shouldn't be any issue with removing that person from coaching, because they shouldn't have been coaching. But that person is very likely, as is intimated in the question, to have a child playing in that team, because most coaches have. So how do you manage that person being a parent? Well, the simple answer to that, which is an incredibly difficult answer, is that you just have to manage it. Now, it may be that person will walk away in disgust and take their child with them, and that would be a shame, but it would solve the problem for your club. But if not, that person must abide by the codes of conduct for parents and carers and spectators. So if they sign the codes of conduct, which is a really important thing for clubs to do, get all parents, coaches to sign the codes of conduct, those parents are saying, I will behave appropriately, I won't challenge coaches, I will be positive, etc., etc. And they accept that if they don't meet those standards, there will be a sanction. So really, it's the codes of conduct is the way to address it with them when they're just a parent, because then you can at least say, you have agreed to this, you haven't done it, therefore we're going to take XYZ action, which might be you ask them to leave the club, you ask them and their child to leave the club, or some other sanction that you as a club decide. That's not a very good answer, but it's a very difficult problem. Yeah. Mike, did you come in again there, or have you just not put your hand down?
Oh, no, I'm fine. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. So I don't know who asked the question, whether I've answered it.
There's another question, Graham. Is it
Yeah.
okay to give reassurances about undergoing DBS if, as said earlier, historical unrelated offences might flag up?
Yeah, absolutely. The issue there is the DBS is private between the applicant and the government. So the person applying for the DBS doesn't have to tell you that they are anything, that doesn't have to tell you anything about what's on their certificate. But if they do, and they say, yeah, look, I was, I had a fight in a pub when I was 18 and I'm 58 now, then it is perfectly okay to say, look, I can't promise, but my belief is that you won't be stopped from coaching if that's all there is on your certificate. Yeah, absolutely. Anyone have any other questions? Okay, listen, thank you so much for attending tonight. I can't reiterate how much I can say that if you have any issues or anything at all, please email me, give me a call. I will always try and help. You might feel on your own sometimes. You're not on your own. There's me and Rob and Rod, who's another deputy safeguarding officer. We're all there to help you, and we will always do everything we can. So thank you so much for attending. Thank you so much for doing the role, and I'll see you all soon. Hopefully I'll see you at a monthly meeting in due course. Thank you very much. Good night to you all.